years ago where the National Guard got scared and somebody pulled the trigger, then they all started pulling the trigger. I am so scared that something, if it's not controlled right, somebody's going to get hurt. And that's my only concern. I think we need to show the government, we need to know what's going on in Area 51. We need to know and have disclosure. Is there aliens out here? Are they our friends, all of them? Or do we have something we have to be scared about? The government needs to come out and assure us what is going on.
Right. Just tell us it's real. You don't have to, disclose everything, but just don't completely lie and ignore. And I mean, it's just not a tenable situation. I don't advise anyone to storm Area 51 and try to run through the gates. I know people who've had guns pulled on them. This is a very serious subject on both sides. There are people being abducted who need help. I get emails fairly regularly from people who are have no one to turn to. And they shouldn't have to come to, me. There should be, taught in schools. There should be hospitals. There should be all the forces of society being put towards this. And if you decide to you think you're going to, meet the aliens by storming Area 51, well, you better bring about, 2 weeks worth of water because it's huge. It's it would take you days to drive around this thing. Nevada is more owned by the military than any other state. It's going to shock you when I tell you how much. It's 86% owned by the military.
Oh yeah, I used to go see art quite a bit through the years, and a lot of times I would drive my vehicle, a lot of times I'd ride my motorcycle, and I would see all these bases, base after government property everywhere, and I was going, wow. This is really shocking. It's not like in the state of Washington where you got, Bangor, you got, Fort Lewis, you got McCord, and you got some places in Spokane. This place is seemed like every 100 miles there was something government.
Yeah, it's vast in that area, and there's an enormous amount of money. And this sort of points towards there's like two different United States. There's the regular citizen, the outsider. And then there's this secret underground United States where aliens are real, and people are living in these underground cities. We got glimpses of this with the Manhattan Project. But that sort of thing apparently has been ongoing ever since.
Well, the only thing that still scares me, Calvin Parker, I'm sure you heard his story, haven't you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when I had him on my show, I kind of pinned him in a rabbit hole, as Art would always say. And I asked him, I said, Calvin, honestly, what's your feeling from your abduction? Were they, friendly towards you, or did you feel they were evil? And his answers, and I think you heard it, James, was they were evil. And
definitely.
Yeah, he got the impression they weren't here to serve man, at least whatever did with him. I mean, what they put him through. I mean, if I abducted somebody and started doing some of the stuff that these people are going through, I would be locked away in a mental institution to the day I died.
Yes, I agree. It's a fundamental problem with ET-human relations. Kidnapping is illegal in every country on the planet, as far as I know. It's absolutely a crime. But what I don't see in onboard UFO accounts is sadism, is deliberate torture for fun, murder, that sort of thing. What we see is an absolute disregard for human feelings, or, people regularly tell me, they don't care about me. The guy I'm interviewing now in England, he's like, they stuck a needle in my temple, and I'm like, oh, you're hurting me. Well, he says, these guys don't believe in anesthesia. They couldn't care less. And that's about the worst I see, and I actually don't get that a whole lot, I have to tell you. Normally when someone experiences pain, one of the grays or whatever ET is there will place their hand on the forehead and all the pain is gone. And I don't see a whole lot of injuries. I do see a number of women who have gynecological problems, but a good percentage of the cases, 10, 20% do involve healings. And some researchers think the percentage is much higher. I don't, but I do see it pretty regularly, and I hear things like, my health is great, and I'm in my 80s. I went to the doctor, and my heart is like a teenager, and this sort of thing regularly. So I'm like, gosh, I flip-flop a little bit.
Well, maybe they're experimenting on mankind, adjusting their DNA, doing things for some type of motive, and we just don't know what the motive is. That's where disclosure needs to come out. I'm sure somebody somewhere knows what this is actually going on and why.
You sparked the memory of a case in Gainesville, Florida. This is in my book, The Healing Power of UFOs. Jim Law, he was suffering from, I believe it was a hernia. He had a regular contact with gray ETs and gotten to the point where he was talking to them when they'd come, because they've been coming so often. And they show up, and he's like, hey, if you're going to abduct me, I want you to fix my hernia. And they said to him, and I'm pretty much quoting here, we know of the problem that you speak, and we will repair it. And they did. They fixed it up right away, right there. And he's like, wow, why are you abducting me? What is it about me? And they said, we find you of interest because of your genetic propensity to live a long time. And he thought that was really interesting because his grandfather at that time was 105 years old.
Oh, wow.
Writing a book about it. Right? So that speaks to exactly what you're saying there, that perhaps, they are experimenting with us. And I think the evidence for that is overwhelming. I was getting hybrid baby cases back when I first started investigating in 1988. And we see that in, ancient writings as well. The people mating with the gods and so on. It looks like there's been a lot of genetic manipulation for a long time. And so perhaps, we've seen this rise in human lifespan over the last 100 years. It's practically doubled. So that could be ET influence.
It could be. Do you think, too, because the climate change, the earth changes and stuff like that, maybe they're making adjustments for we adjust to what's going to be going on to our planet?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a book that's doing really well right now on Amazon that humans are not from Earth. And I kind of came to that conclusion some years ago in my research because there were so many human-looking ETs. And that really raised a lot of questions. I'm like, if there are ETs out there that look just like us, well, did we originate here on Earth? And the gist of the book is no, we didn't, because of the weather is the main reason. We're just not suitable to this planet. So I've heard of cases of that where people are being experimented on to have their lungs removed and put alien lungs in, and these are some of the more lurid sort of fringe cases, so they could live on other planets, and that sort of thing. So gosh, who knows?
Now, James, did you have a question, James?
Yeah, I was just going to say, alluding to what he was saying there. You talk about maybe we weren't from here. Well, here's the thing. Why do we have so many bad reactions to the sun rays and all that stuff? And there was some scientific studies done on this stuff. We were actually kind of probably be more suited to be on Mars at one point, which is kind of a fascinating fact too. But, you think about it, why would we have reactions to the sun, especially over hundreds of thousands of years? We should not have any bad reactions. If you're out in it too long, you get burnt, you get cancer, and all these other things. And that's something to think about anyway. But you just reminded me of that and the science report I'd read on that.
Yeah, you have to wonder, all the allergies and stuff. And gosh, it's hard to say. But I do feel like ETs are behind the scenes manipulating a lot of things. And people say, I've never seen a UFO and it doesn't affect my life. Well, I got news for you. It does, because it looks like they're really controlling a lot of things. There's a number of cases where people have had basically their relationships, their significant other set up with them by the ETs. I've got a couple of cases like that myself where people were having encounters and were pulled together under very unusual circumstances and ended up having encounters together. And the ETs basically said, yeah.
Now,
another case
for?
I know in Virginia where that happened.
Now, was that for maybe breeding purposes?
Yeah, I think that is sort of the implication. Hard to say because we just don't know that, but we do know that the ETs are following families, and they have said flat out. One lady I interviewed, the ETs told her, "Oh yeah, we've been following your family line since biblical times." I know Jim Sparks, another really well-known experiencer, was told by the ETs that they had followed his family line to caveman times. They showed him.
Oh, wow. Now, I got a funny feeling all through those years, they've been tweaking with our DNA.
Would make sense for the missing link and how Neanderthals and Cro-Magnons and you know, how suddenly we're Homo sapiens. And what are we going to see next is what I'm wondering, because that's what it looks like we're seeing is, you know, each generation becoming a little bit more advanced. People talk about indigo children, and I wonder about that, because there does seem to be a movement towards sort of a psychic awareness.
Oh, well, you know, another theory in a lot of these visitations, which I think is fascinating, I think is very plausible, is us. It's human beings from the faraway future coming back, because we've evolved so much into, you know, we've so much more of a machine type thing that we maybe need to come back and tweak our DNA so they can have more emotions or even breeding stock. And I think that was a kind of fascinating theory too.
But, you know, guys, what I really think about, if you go back to the 14th century, 16th century, you go back to Roman days, the average height of a person, okay, and all of a sudden, the men started getting taller, okay, they started losing their hair, more muscular, losing that. But, I mean, the people, we evolved at a certain point where what we are now. And I got a funny feeling that they've been tweaking with our DNA the last, you know, right, probably from the get-go.
You're right. And you know what else? Our life expectancy has expanded for each sex throughout the years also, to coincide with what you're saying about the height.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And we have all these different races. Race is such a huge issue on our planet. And we've got this really wide genetic diversity, which I think might be one of the reasons we are like some sort of breeding, you know, playground or what have you for these ETs. It's interesting because this sort of thing, you know, seems to be their primary interest. When someone's taken on board a craft, it's the one thing I certainly hear the most, and this has been borne out by a number of studies, is that people are physically examined and have genetic material removed, or of some kind, whether it's hair, skin, or saliva, or what have you.
Or eggs from women. I've had, you know, abductees that claim that they have had eggs removed. I actually even had a year and a half ago a guest on it claimed that she was, you know, got pregnant and she couldn't figure out how. She claimed she didn't have sex with anybody, and all of a sudden she was pregnant. And after about 3 or 4 months, then she wasn't pregnant when she went back to the doctor. So it's really, you know, things are going on. And that's what the scary part is. And people, a lot of people, I guess, you know what, unless they see it, it doesn't exist.
I have to wonder how many UFOs are out there, because they've been collecting, you know, eggs and genetic material for a long, long time, and supposedly creating hybrids, but probably not just hybrids, probably fully human as well. I mean, that would make sense to me. Why wouldn't they? So how many people are here on Earth who are knowingly aliens and are masquerading as humans, you know, sort of walking among us? I'm sure that's got to be happening.
Well, how many might be in governments?
Right. And how many, you know, we know the Greys have the ability to sort of project screen imagery, and the reptilians as well, to be, you know, full on just wearing a costume, so to speak.
Oh, yeah.
Really hard to say. But, yeah, I do think it's a very pervasive phenomenon. And
It's scary, actually. Hey, we need to go on break again. We'll be back in about 2.5 minutes. We got Preston on, we got James, and you got me, Gary, on Night